Right. And I think sometimes we avoid doing something not because we like in addition to fear that we might not achieve the goal, but might also because that thing is so important to us. If we commit to that and we fail, then we really truly feel nothing. Like there's no importance of me living in this world. So instead we deviate to try to hit those secondary goals that's not important to our core life value at all.
Hello, and welcome to the Working From Home podcast. I am your host, Nelson Jordan, and today I'm delighted to say we have Angie Wang of the Curious Barbell podcast. That's curiousbarbell.com. Hi, Angie.
Hi, Nelson. Thank you for inviting me on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for agreeing to appear. Really, really appreciate it. So what is the Curious Barbell? What do you do?
Okay, so I host the Curious Barbell podcast as at the beginning to solve my own personal problem. I graduated from like a very nice school in New York, and then I went into a very traditional path in the office. At the same time, I really love powerlifting. So it's like a struggle between, should I stay in my well-paid job or should I just go pursue my passion in powerlifting? It's been like a long struggle, maybe like 3 years, debating between myself and like fight against the family. And they finally decided to become a personal trainer. And I found out that was not the end goal of life. Mm-hmm. I do landed my dream job. I'm helping people. I learned so much as a human being, but as a newbie coach, there's so much to learn, and the uncertainty of not knowing what to do with your clients and not knowing like, is it it? Is this it? Is this like, this is my whole life goal is going to base on being a personal trainer. I feel like I have such a diverse background of being like a sociology major, literature major. I really love talking to people. I love gender and sports, but those are the things that I couldn't find satisfaction with just being a trainer. So I launched the Curious Barbell podcast to interview people who are leaders in this industry, how they got to where they are today, and like some professional knowledge that I still couldn't figure out when I was a newbie coach. And right now, Curious Barbell has become a compound service. So podcast is the center of the service. And surrounded, we have book clubs, online courses, global meetups and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm sure we will do over the coming hour. But so essentially, the Curious Barbell, you've got the podcast is kind of the main way that you're bringing people in, and you're talking to other coaches in the industry. Is it? Okay, perfect.
Right.
So is your audience other kind of fitness coaches who want to learn how to expand their reach, or is it just coaches in general?
Yeah, coaches and also a lot of fitness lovers, which I was kind of surprised to find out because I didn't go out to solve fitness lovers' problems. Mm-hmm. So I just want to know more about the life stories behind the more advanced coaches, mm-hmm. how they explore through their career. But turned out the questions I try to explore on the podcast is also what people wanted to know. So mm-hmm. my audience is kind of from all over the place.
Sure. No, but sometimes that's how it happens, right? You start off one thing and you end up pivoting to another when you find actually the demand is somewhere else. And that's right. Part of like when you run a community like you do and you're interacting with these people, the fact that you can have these day-to-day conversations and, you know, you have a conversation on Monday and by Friday you've brought something else to kind of cater for that market. I think that's fantastic. So right. there was quite a lot, you know, to unpack with your opening statement, right? So you started off kind of going down that corporate route, right?
Mm-hmm.
How far did you get down to that? Did you have like a proper office job? What were you doing?
Right. I graduated from sociology at Columbia, and at that time I really want to get into consulting because that's what every Ivy League school students do. And so I ended up in a think tank working in artificial intelligence project. But I remember I was on the way to my work and I was reading Excellent Sheep. It's a book about like how people are trapped in the educational system and think they have only one way to achieving a successful life. And I was crying in on the bus and getting to work. That total like leads to a 3 year of struggling.
Mm. Cool. That was kind of your, I suppose, your opening, right? When you were exposed to this alternative that you'd always been kind of pushed down one path. And you didn't know there were like these other kind of, not even these other paths, but these other kind of forms of transport that you could, I suppose, have taken. And that was obviously quite it sounds like quite an emotional time for you.
It is.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, for me, like right now, I'm living a digital nomad life, but 3 years or maybe 5 years ago, digital nomad is a noun that is like unknown to me. I don't know what else can I do except for accepting a full-time job. And it's until that I started really listening to podcasts and getting into maybe the very cliche Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week that I realized there is another choice of life. But I think these type of alternative choices doesn't really, it's not like, I think we always thought that, oh, I'm struggling right now, but there will be a epic moment where I have enlightenment and then I will change and I will quit and then I will just arrive at my perfect life the next day. But reality doesn't usually work like this. You're contemplating about the options you have. You assess the resources you have. Someday you are really brave. You think I'm going to quit next week. And then the next day, maybe like, oh, still leading a pretty good life. Why not just keep it? So I think it's like you have to keep pushing out some, we call like MVP experiments with what you can do right now. For me, I go on to, I enter competitions to see if I'm really capable physically of becoming a coach. Or I went to take international license on being a personal coach to see knowledge-wise if I'm really passionate about this subject. There are many small steps I took to try to explore if transition into another career is really what I want.
So as you said, there was no one moment where you were like, I've achieved enlightenment or nirvana, and found exactly what you're going to do. So it was a small step. And did you do those over multiple years while you're still in your previous role?
I think so. I think what I mean is there's no like that moment and then you achieve everything, you quit. But I think there's definitely that moment of I realize I'm not doing everything for my life. And I think for women especially, a lot of women I talked about, they have this epiphany when they turn 30. For me, it's the same. I feel fine all the way to 29. I don't feel like I need like to be in a relationship or I need to do something to improve my life. But I remember the clock that turned 30. When I turned 30, I was like, holy shit, what am I doing here? I wanted to pursue my fitness dream for so long and I just keep postponing it because like maybe the relationship I'm in, they tell me that, oh, if you're getting a personal trainer job, then it's not really a high social status job. Like, do you really want that? And or like my family is telling me that, well, if you are going to be a personal training, why do you bother to get all the education before anyway? But it was the moment when I turned 30 that I realized I really need to do something because when you turn 30, life is only now. There is no in the future, I might be someone else. It's a very present sense of life. And I think it's after that, the third year, that I finally realized I need to do something, that I started to aggressively send out resumes and then trying to see what are the real salary situation, how many work hours do I need to do to become a personal trainer and earn a small, like still decent salary and stuff. So it was, I think it's an emotional moment plus meeting the right person plus doing the right small steps all at the same time.
Definitely. So you felt a lot of societal pressure and pressure from your family to kind of stick to the route that was set out for you by these, firstly by your family, their expectations, but also from the educational standpoint. You know, you were speaking about like, it's the thing that every Ivy League schooler does, right? They go and work for some consultancy of some kind. They become management consultants or something along along those lines anyway. So just to recap then, you'd obviously had these passions for a long time and were kind of exploring them, but not kind of fully invested because you were kind of sticking with your main role. You had that kind of change of heart, I suppose, where it suddenly kind of dawned on you that you really needed to be pursuing this role at when you hit your 30th birthday. What was the next step, kind of the one big step that you took to commit yourself to this journey?
I think one is definitely sending out a lot of resumes at the same time and keep talking to the employers. Mm-hmm. Because when you think about career alternative, you might imagine a different salary structure, different type of work style. But until you really go into it, you will only know the limitations and possibilities of changing a career. Mm-hmm. And that's the time I realized if I change my career, there's more than personal trainer jobs I can do. There is also like a technology project manager for a sports tech company. Mm-hmm. You can also be a researcher for a sports think tank. You can also like pursue academic job in the university related to sports. So that's the time I realized, I can actually fulfill so many sides of myself if I make this transition. It just really depends on how I want to organize my life and how I want to reach out to different people to build the opportunity.
So was that kind of just through applications, or did you do a lot of reaching out to people on like a direct one-to-one basis and having those conversations and finding out more about it?
I would say it's definitely sending out a resume, but what you just mentioned, I think what I was lacking is really talking to people who work in the industry, but not the people who recruit. Mm-hmm. So I think one mistake I made is I kind of get an idea of salary structures in the industry. But unfortunately, for the jobs I apply, I think not every of the employers speak the truth. So when I really landed, I have a better picture of what the industry is like before I made the research. But then it's really after I start working as a personal trainer that I realized, holy shit, there is a totally different aspect of the industry. And I think it would be definitely wise for me in the beginning to really reach out to someone and ask them about what is it like to be a personal trainer 24 hours. Does your aspiration change throughout the time? Mm-hmm. Does your passion change throughout the time? These are the things I definitely recommended people to figure out before they make a huge decision on career.
Yeah, I think there's just so much value in talking to people and having casual conversations. I think a lot of us are reluctant to do so because we think that we're taking up too much of the other person's time, or we're being too polite, or we think people just won't help us. But in my experience, yeah, okay, occasionally you get people that give you kind of negative feedback, but for the most part, people are generally quite happy to have that conversation if you approach them in the right way. If you approach them and say, this is what I'm thinking of doing, you make it easy for them to respond. Like you're not sending them a massive essay. You've just got a couple of the most important questions you want to get answered. In my experience, people are pretty happy to actually lend you a helping hand if they sense that you are generally trying to make an improvement to your own life. You're not trying to sell them something, for example. People are a lot more friendly. So once you kind of decided to go down this route and you made done all the applications and things like that, did you end up working for a company in a full-time salaried role, or did you end up kind of just working for yourself?
I ended up landing in a ninja training gym. It's like a full-time thing. So that's basically what I do. I didn't build my podcast until I think 8 or 9 months into that full-time role. Mm-hmm. During that 9 months, I was trying to figure out, okay, so I know there are different possibilities of what I can do, but I'm pretty much confined into the hourly base per one-on-one personal training. And personal training is such a physically demanding job. Mm-hmm. So I'm so exhausted at the end of the day. I have these ideas. Okay, I want to launch a podcast, maybe. but I never really took a step until maybe 8 months later I took a course. That's another story, but I wanted to deep dive into more about the cultural differences, about like being a Taiwanese in Taiwan, or being as opposed to being someone in an individualist country who has more confidence building throughout the childhood. So like I keep when we were brought up, we were always told that if we get a 98% out at 98 scores out of 100, we're being told that, oh, there are 2 scores that you didn't achieve and that you should be ashamed of, as compared to, oh, you did 98 out of this 100 test. This is so good. So I feel like
I think
this is like a
it's even
same.
it's even more different, right? If I brought a 98 home, I would be accused of cheating. Okay, there's like it's not even that you've done so well. Like it would go even further. It'd be like, no, you didn't get that. Like you don't pull the wool over my eyes. But I totally get what you're saying. There's these cultural differences.
Right. It's like the fear it's like you're always telling yourself you're not good enough and that you're not even conscious of that. So in terms of like reaching out to people, maybe when I was in a coach position, I know there are many fantastic coaches and I can reach out to, but I was feeling too small. I was feeling that I'm not important enough to talk to those people. And it's not just about taking their time. It's like thinking, like, who am I to contact them? Why do I deserve their attention? Why do they want to share their life stories to me, a stranger, or to anyone on the podcast? Mm-hmm. And I keep wanting to launch this podcast, but there are so many negative self-talks going on. Like, oh, who do you think you are? You're just a newbie in this industry. You're 1 year in and you think you can interview an industry leader? What if I say something wrong on the podcast and they found out, oh, I actually know nothing about fitness or physiology or anatomy? And then I really bring my status in the industry lower than before I start the podcast. What if the really vulnerable stories I share, people find it I'm oversharing and they don't care. They just think I'm being like an emotional girl or something. So there are a lot of negative self-talks going on. And I have an amazing partner who has been going on this nomadic journey for 3 years. And he keeps encouraging me. He said, I think you're so different. I think you have this sociology and literature background. You're into fitness. You can definitely build something so extraordinary that people with rather single background couldn't achieve. And I was just like, what are you talking about? It's not possible. But it's through that course I took that I made a public commitment that I wanted to launch a podcast at the end of the 4-week course. I launched it, and at that time, I still didn't have any confidence, and I just told myself, okay, I'm going to make it a 4 weeks experiment. If no one is listening to the podcast and I just feel that this stuff, I'm just going to take it like a fun project, and I'll stop at the end of 4 weeks. But once I started, it became its own momentum. It's like it's like an organic thing that is snowballing into something else. And every conversation you have with another human being, it just blows your mind by how many different sides of the world and yourself that you see in that conversation. So I think that after I started the podcast, I've discovered so many different sides of myself, what I'm capable of and what I'm not capable of. And I think I'm still in this conversation with you, Nelson, I'm still like discovering different sides of myself as I put out this narrative about me, right? So yeah, I just deviate into, I don't know what I'm talking about right now.
No, I mean, that's fantastic. There's so many like really interesting things there that I almost don't know where to start, because towards the kind of beginning of your answer there, the thing that I was getting from you is like imposter syndrome, right? You were really worried, and this is something everyone has gone through. I think if you say that you haven't gone through this at some point with something, I'm probably going to call you a liar, because it's just so hard to deal with, right? Putting yourself out there, this position of vulnerability when you're almost putting your hand up and you're saying, this is me, this is what I believe in, and you're kind of exposing yourself. it's like the I can't remember what the phrase is now, but it's probably going to come to me later. But the I don't know, it's something like the taller corn is the one that's cut down, or something along like that. But it's when you stick out, like you put yourself in a position to potentially get hurt. I think, and like as humans, we have this safety mechanism that says conformity is the safest option, I suppose. And I think that like I felt a lot of that in what you said about like, who am I to interview these people? And that's something that like I dealt with as well when I decided to record this podcast. And it actually made me kind of steer away from certain subjects, actually, because I was like, who am I to talk about those subjects? Whereas, you know, this working from home and entrepreneurship, and kind of working out fledgling business models is actually something that I do feel qualified to talk about. But it's super interesting, the stuff that I chose not to, right? And the stuff that obviously initially held you back, and you were just in the very fortunate position that you had people there to support you, to tell you, like, Angie, this is all in your head. You're far more qualified than you think to talk about this. And it's super interesting. Like, generally, the people that I see have imposter syndrome the most are people that are eminently qualified and very, very intelligent, but they're so intelligent that they know how much of the world that they don't know about. And they're more reluctant to not want to talk about that stuff because they're like, well, I think I know this, but then I know all these other things that kind of contradict that. And they're very measured and kind of more well-rounded. Whereas actually the people that are more blasé and more kind of content to talk about themselves are generally those people that don't know as much about the world, but think they do, and are quite content to just be like, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, cool. Right. Okay. You clearly don't know like that much, but it's quite hard if you're just watching some internet guru's video and they just talk about something for 2 minutes. It's only when you have these longer conversations with people when you actually say, hang on, I don't think you know what you're talking about. Or you're talking with somebody like yourself who dealt with imposter syndrome, who very clearly does. And then the kind of other thing that you talked about was accountability. It was when you made this public declarative statement to say, I am going to do this. And then you used that pressure, but you used it in a positive way to actually say, like, to commit you to a goal. And I think that's fantastic. And I think there's a place for those sort of communities where you can actually be like, this is what I'm going to do, and this is when I'm going to do it by. Okay. And I think that when you're going to do it by is super important, because we all like weaseling out and getting out of things that we commit ourselves to. We almost lie to ourselves sometimes that if we don't achieve a goal, it's because we never really wanted to achieve that goal. We obviously did want to achieve it at that particular time, and then we're making excuses for ourselves to protect our ego afterwards. So I think that's absolutely fascinating what you said.
Right. And I think sometimes we avoid doing something not because we, like, in addition to fear that we might not achieve the goal, but might also because that thing is so important to us. If we commit to that and we fail, then we really truly feel nothing. Like, there's no importance of me living in this world. So instead we deviate to try to hit those secondary goals that's not important to our core life value at all. And I think during the past 10 months of interviewing people on my podcast, one of the things that I really realized that has fundamentally changed who I feel I am right now is that there is no issue of qualification of doing what you do. Mm-hmm. Because I think like I interview people who are like maybe same level newbie coaches like me, or people who are like really influential. And I found out they are all just people who want to be loved, want to be known, and want to be accepted. I remember I was referred to like people like those leading figure in the industry, and I was so scared at the same time. But when I reach out, what they say is, are you sure? Like, am I qualified to talk on this podcast? And they just maybe like keep apologizing for what I do. And that's the moment I realized, holy shit, they're just like me. They just want friends. They just want true relationship, and they just want someone who talk to them, not like respecting they're a professional, but like talk to them in a way that accept them they're also real human beings. And so I think definitely wouldn't say that I have no fear in doing things right now, but it's that I understand that we share the same ground as a human being. And if you want to build connection with someone, it's because you're truly curious about who she or he is, and you truly want to build a meaningful community and conversation with them. And with that in mind, there is really no, am I good enough or not good enough? There's really only how much you care about this human being, and are you willing to go on this journey with him and her? That's definitely, I think, one thing that I wish I know at the beginning, but this is really going back to growth mindset, is something that you can only realize after you commit to do things, regardless of the fear you have.
Yeah, definitely. It's so interesting because I've done a little bit of work with personal trainers and with people with gym owners, because I'm a copywriter. So they want their websites redoing, and I rewrite their landing pages, email series, whatever it is. And it's so interesting, like working with a few different people and finding out what their motivations are for doing what they do. And like in the fitness space, there's quite like a diverse way of going around it. So I'm working with a high performance gym at the moment in the US, and they're very much like hands-on. Okay, so they're the sort of people that know everybody in the gym like by name. They know exactly what their kids are doing at school. They know like all of the holidays that they're going on, and these people basically are so invested in their life and in their journey and in improving their lives. They want to give 100% when they come to their personal training sessions. Whereas I've seen some other ones, like through Facebook ads, for example, that I really just don't get that same feeling of connection. Like I don't get a sense that coach would actually care about anybody's results. And I think it's that like authenticity. I think in a short-term interaction, it's quite hard to understand if somebody does want the best for you. But like multiple interactions over a long time period, it definitely comes to light whether coaches or partners or anybody you work with or have a relationship with personal actually cares about you. But that's super cool. So you started with your the podcast, and you almost gave yourself again, quite interesting. You relieved the pressure by just saying, I'm just going to commit to this, did you say 4-week period or something like that?
Right, like 4 episodes.
4 episodes, fantastic. So that's another like quite interesting tactic that people can employ when they know that they want to do something, but they don't necessarily want to be forced to commit to it 100%, because sometimes if you commit to something 100%, it means that you just won't do it at all because you've got so many other things going on. You don't know if it's right for you. Yeah, it's the same as when we talked about talking to people before moving into a potential new career. You don't want to necessarily take that jump. You want a little way of kind of dipping your toe in, testing the water and seeing what's what. So talk me through kind of like the first 4 episodes and the feeling like, actually, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to take it further.
So I think that 4 episode is confirming what I do before, confirming what I realized before I started the podcast. So I mentioned the course, and it's called Reinvent. And we did a fear setting exercise, which is very famous from Tim Ferriss too. And that's the time I realized, okay, so in addition to all the negative self-talks I have to myself regarding the podcast, I also have a lot of partial benefits that I didn't realize. For example, I will know how to edit podcasts. I will know how to do interviews. I will be able to meet cool human beings and hear cool stories. I might be able to impact some people's life choices in terms of transition career. And most importantly, I will know what it's like to act on something when I still have the fear. And each episode I launch is like, I didn't even know that's what it's really like when those partial benefits become true, like becomes a real thing. I remember inviting someone who's like, I was kind of scared to talk to, but he immediately like say, yes, why not? And I see him telling his stories on the sofa of our Taipei apartment. And I not only saw his stories being unfold, I also see like a new self of me being unfold. And this possibility is you feel like there's a huge momentum that you're building to push this project forward. And that momentum in turn come back and push you forward too. It's not just like what kind of metrics I achieve. So I'm going to launch more podcasts in addition to this four. It's like it's an unnameable force that you feel like you're regaining control of your life. You feel like you're empowering yourself and you feel like you're empowering other people too by making them talk about their own stories. And then I think the best things that support me to going on that journey is that after the interview, my guests will tell me, "Oh, thank you so much for interview. I think I know different sides of myself and I know more about myself." And that's what I think that, okay, so it's really not just for me now. And this project is also influencing other people's life. And I continue to get so many messages from people who's not even interested in fitness industry, just tell me how much of the career sharing has changed them, how they think about themselves. And most of the time they're like typing message to me saying, "Hey, I'm crying while I listen to your podcast. It's really solved the problem I've been thinking for a long time." I think it's through these moments, that this very like emotional moments that kept me going.
Mm-hmm. No, that's awesome. And I can hear it, like just talking to you and hearing from your story, like going from, this, I guess, kind of this transformation period, right? You were kind of set up to go in one specific direction. Everything that you've been doing in your life was kind of geared towards this one kind of goal, I suppose, through obviously high performance, top university or college, as you guys probably say, and then kind of this job afterwards, and that's true of a lot of people. Not necessarily the same path, but the fact that they feel like their direction in life has already been laid out for them, and they don't necessarily have a choice in that. And fortunately, these days is more true than ever before, and next year it will probably be even truer, is that lots of those barriers are breaking down now through kind of the working from home movement. We have a lot of the technology, but the technology is really just a facilitator. I think the key thing is the access that we've got to people sharing their knowledge, people like yourself who are able to share your story. Like previously, like 20 years ago, I wouldn't be talking to you. I wouldn't have heard your story. There wouldn't be that sense of connection there. And the technology is a great facilitator of that. But like the knowledge sharing, I think, is probably the most important thing that's kind of come from this internet economy, in my eyes at least. But yeah, I'm not surprised you're getting messages, Angie. I think you've got like a lovely story. And you're very self-reflective about it as well, and analytical. No, not
I often joke about this on my podcast because, like, coming from literature, sociology background, you're always analyzing the sentence the other person say, what verb they choose, what noun they choose, and how do they put out themselves in their own narrative. So I think that's a strength for building a podcast, but that's also a weakness when you interpret people's reaction too much.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a sweet spot there, but I'm not sure anybody's found it yet. No, that's fantastic. So going back to kind of like the working from home stuff, what's your current situation? Are you still working full time and then running the podcast on the side, or what's that kind of looking like these days?
I think when you work for yourself, there is nothing called working full time anymore, right? What is the exact amount of hours that means full time? It's really depends. It really,
I wouldn't calculate that because I think I might cry.
I think like if I'm working on a project, I thought that it would be cool to do it because people might think I'm cool, but I don't really enjoy it. And 3 hours, I'm working overtime. Mm-hmm. But if I'm working on a project I'm super passionate about, 20 hours is like nothing. So right now, I would say like I could achieve a balance between 5 to 8 hours a day. And I just launched my first product. It's an online course in July. I'm still searching for a new meaning of my life right now because I just realized all those benchmarks I set for myself and the hours I put in to achieve those benchmarks, it's sort of empty afterwards. Mm-hmm. Like I thought being a solopreneur, it means that you have to launch certain type of products and you eventually figure out a business model that is very sustainable and something that you can tell people about. Oh, I'm this type of solopreneur. This is what I do. This is my product. This is my services. I earn this amount of revenue and I live in this kind of Airbnb. But it's a very painful realization to know that, oh, all these benchmarks doesn't really bring you internal happiness. I remember I thought I dreamed about launching this online course for like ever since I make my career transition. And I thought that's something that is going to make me so proud of myself. Like it earned a badge for me to blend into the digital nomad community and like I'm finally able to hang out with other people as an entrepreneur too. And I can't believe how empty I feel the first day after I launched the course. I was just like, wait, what's going on? I really don't understand. I'm really, really confused right now. Why do I feel this way? And so that was a huge shock for me. I think right now I try to put still like 5 to 8 hours of work day, but I don't have a goal to reach now. Right now, I'm more like trying to be even more reflective than before to know what I really want and what really keeps me alive and what are the things that are really important to me in my life that I should prioritize. So those hours that I have now is more like maintaining the momentum of doing things. Otherwise, I'll feel like I'm collapsed into like all this very like the numbness of I was unable to do things. So, yeah.
No, awesome. Okay, so it sounds to me, and like correct me if I'm wrong, that you're kind of looking for the next, not necessarily project to focus on, but the next like area that you want to kind of work on. What does that kind of look like in terms of anything that you're doing, conversations that you're having with yourself, with your partner, with your friends and support system? Or is that more just something that internally you're just trying to work through on when it happens and I get some sort of inspiration or I see something that I really click with? What does that kind of look like?
I come from a very like normie family, so it's my partner. So most of the conversations going on between me and my partner and some other friends that we share similar curiosity with. And I think it's always something that my partner can see clearly. At the beginning, he was like, you're pursuing something that I don't think you're really enjoying. I was like, what do you mean? I need to build an Instagram follower so when I launch my course, people will buy it. What do you mean? Like, that doesn't really, I don't think I want to launch those kind of podcasts or those type of project because my market won't like it. My partner would just be so mad at me. He was always telling me like, what do you mean by market? You don't have a market. You just have someone who believes in you and someone who want to go on a journey with you. And through those type of moments that made me realize that I keep adopting the work language I have before I quit my full-time job. I know I have to unlearn everything I learned before in order to really embrace the new self I'm becoming and embrace a new lifestyle and like curiosity of life. But it's just so easy for me to fall into those traps to evaluate myself through a more traditional work standards. So like I think the question I'm exploring right now is who I am without pursuing the next goal or trying to find the next goal. Because I know like whatever, even though, okay, a few months ago, I want to be a mindfulness teacher because that really helped me a lot, like transform myself. And then now I realize, okay, even though I become a mindfulness teacher, I launched a mindfulness program and I launched a mindfulness course. I'm still going to be the same amount of emptiness that I feel. So who I am without this pursuit of next goal. And so that's something that I'm trying to explore. I really want to have I want to be able to push a stop button and to just stop all my projects, which I'm very glad that we are having this 3 weeks road trip to the US, which I'm going to go completely phoneless. So I expect there will be a lot of reflection on the paper, asking myself a lot of questions, discussing with my partner, and just to see who am I without calling myself this pioneer in the fitness industry or like this Curious Barbell founder. Who am I when I'm just in nature with my partner? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly interesting, this kind of goal setting as a bit of a paradox, in that I think humans without goals tend to go off the rails, is my personal view. I think goals are really, really helpful, but at the same time, you don't want to get on this constant ladder of just setting goals, and then as soon as you've hit that goal, that didn't make you any happier or more fulfilled rather than happy, I suppose. And then the only way that you can kind of motivate yourself to do anything is by setting another goal. And then you like rinse, repeat. And so it's a super interesting paradox for me, like how we as humans can set helpful goals. I'm not even sure if goal is necessarily the right terminology because it carries all this baggage with it, in terms of like feelings that you get through language. I think you're probably better to speak on that than me, given your past. But so one of the things that I'm interested in, because you mentioned travel there, is where are you based in the world right now?
I am in Connecticut, US. So it's like East Coast, close to New York, but not really, like in the very suburb. Previous to this, I was in Spain, Canary Islands. And then next, after my visa in the States expired, and we're heading to Mexico in early October.
Oh, early October. Okay. How do you find kind of the last 6-7 months has affected people like you and I?
For us, I cannot think of like a better way to frame it, because COVID is such a negative impact on human lives. But for remote workers like me, I'm really definitely benefited from it. And I hate to say that because, yeah. And when I lived Taiwan, I think it's hard for people to think about, wait, you personal trainer and you're digital nomad. What else did you like? Exactly what did you do? Do you do online coaching? I was like, no. It's really hard for people to imagine what a fitness nomadic life would be like. I was trying to figure that out too. I don't have 100% confidence, because if you would just go to a local event and attend like an in-person meeting. They'll have much, much better experience of personal exchanges. But right now people can't do that. So once you host a meetup, people are willing to attend. In Taiwan, they're really afraid of Zoom because of the political situation. But now they're willing to, because there's really no other choice to meet other people. I mean, Taiwan is fine now, but if you want to meet if you like US So sports science students, they want to meet each other, they can only meet through online, right? So this pandemic's definitely developing projects wise beneficial for remote workers like us, even though travel wise might not be the best experience.
Yeah, I think it's because I've had this conversation with a few different people now, and I'm just struck by how different it is. Some people have benefited enormously, and some people have done terribly. I probably land somewhere in the middle personally. I have friends that have been let go because they work from home, but they just had one main client, and that client let them go, unfortunately. I've got other people that were unfortunately in the position where they lost their whole business. You know, they had multiple clients, and then all of their clients let them go because they were cutting back, which is super sad. Myself, actually, I lost my my biggest client at the time about a month in, but was fortunate that I could replace it with something else within 3 or 4 days that made up the bulk of that revenue. But I've also heard from people that like their business has absolutely taken off. And I'm not sure whether that's just the environment that we're in, or their timing, or you know, I think it's very, very like specific. What I can say with more confidence, I suppose, is that COVID has, whether or not you're kind of in the camp of, okay, there should have been like a serious quarantine and there should continue to be, or whether you're in the camp of, you know, there's very little to be worried about. There's a bit of a spectrum there, but at the same time, the effects of COVID also have to be weighed up with the effects of isolation. And this is something like, personally, for a long time, I felt quite lonely as a freelancer. I was living in Spain at the time. I was learning Spanish, but couldn't speak it well. And I felt quite isolated because I wasn't working in an office. I was just working in my flat in Valencia in Spain. And I just didn't really know how to go out and talk to people, because it's one thing doing it in your native tongue. It's completely another doing it in a language that you're just learning and you're struggling with. And I feel like that has come almost full circle now, and I'm feeling the effects again in terms of the quarantine, in terms of like the effect on mental health that people working from home kind of have to deal with, depending on where they are country-wise, where they are even in the country. Like we've got spots within the UK where I'm based at the moment that are like specific regions that are in like more of a serious lockdown, and others that aren't. So I think there's the business side of it, the economic side, and then the kind of repercussions that people that are working from home have to deal with in terms of like the mental side, I suppose. What I'd love to see is, you know, how Zoom has done so well as a company, and other conferencing tools, I assume, have done pretty well as well. You know, COVID has acted as a bit of an accelerant in terms of bringing like those technologies forward a couple of years and generating more investment. I'd love to see something also emerge that does a better job on the community side, like a piece of software, a solution that allows for the interactions that normally occur in an office environment. The interactions that are almost like quite spur of the moment, things that just occur. So like when you're going to the kitchen, for example, to make yourself a cup of tea or a coffee, or grab a biscuit, and you bump into somebody and are able to have like a small conversation about how their weekend was, and then you find out about like this restaurant that they went to, and then you're like, I'm going to go to that restaurant. It's like, it's the sort of conversations that slip through the cracks that that they basically aren't large enough to merit you sending an email to somebody about. It would be weird, like if you had somebody that you kind of used to work with or whatever, and you're a freelancer and you have been for a couple of years, you're not going to suddenly email somebody to be like, how was your weekend? For only that. If you've got something else to ask them related to work, then you might slip that in, but you're never going to have that kind of just conversation just to find out that small thing. So there's nothing in the market that I've found, and anybody that's listening to this, please send me an email afterwards if you found something. There's nothing that replicates that interaction, that engagement that you have.
I think that's definitely one of the things that deter people from going into a freelance or solopreneur journey. But I think the good side is also that when we talk about those small chit chats in the office, you have no choice as who you are going to have chit chat with. Those are the people that you're bound to as a team, no matter you like them or not. But as a solopreneur, you are able to choose who you want to be engaged in conversation with. It's like a very switch. You can maybe very fast identify that this person's core value is the same as yours. And if you do find people who are on the same journey as you, you can always find community like on Discord, Slack, or say Circle that we are in to join. But I do understand that it's so, when I was on the first 3 weeks of the nomadic journey, I was like shocked by how lonely it is. So immediately I contacted another podcaster, say, we're going to launch a podcast called Nomadic Taiwanese to talk about how those nomads deal with this like emotional incoherence of what they experienced before as what they experienced on the road. But later when we were in quarantine, we live in a co-living house. And so we were locked down with these 8 other people from different nations for the whole 8 weeks. It's just so, I didn't realize how I was longing for human interaction until the first day I see them. I found myself keep talking. I was really lucky to be locked down in a co-living. And I do think COVID is really like good for remote worker in a sense that is really like, just like you said, Zoom and other communication technologies propelling this movement. And we can see maybe very soon we'll be able to figure out a way to create more interaction, like human interaction through technology. And I think for people who wanted to be remote or freelance for a long time, there is also no excuse for them to not do that because it's going to be a norm. And as discussed in the future of work, that this will be a norm no matter if the pandemic hit or not. And it just really depends on how are you going to resist what you're truly desired in doing, or are you going to like talk to yourself into, no, I'm going to still try on this office job. Remote work is stupid. I still need to go into the office to meet my coworker because I need them. But they might not really bring you true happiness. I think that what COVID taught me is it just gave me a span of time to reflect on how uncertain life really is. It's like this type of uncertainty or this kind of, it's not an accident because life is about uncertainty. It's just how willing are you to face this type of uncertainty, and how willing are you to see a different side of yourself through different type of situation, especially in an extreme situation like this of COVID.
Definitely. I think that's your reflective character coming back to the fore there, coming back to bubbling up to the surface, which is nice to see. So I think that's a really great place to leave things, Angie. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. If you just tell our listeners where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on curiousbarbell.com. It's spelled as CuriousBarbell. You can also have a circle community, but it's mostly like Mandarin based. So if you speak Mandarin, it's community.curiousbarbell.com. You can also find me on Curious Barbell on Instagram.
Lovely. And all of those are going to be in the show notes anyway. So people can just click through. All right. Thank you again, Angie. And thank you everyone for listening. And that's it for today. You've been listening to the Working From Home podcast with me, Nelson Jordan. We've been talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly side of remote work. Thanks so much for listening, and I really hope you've enjoyed the time you've spent with us today. If you'd like to discuss the podcast, you want to make a new friend, or you're interested in working with me on a copywriting or digital marketing project, then visit nelson-jordan.com. That's nelson-jordan.com, where you can also sign up to my newsletter to hear about this podcast and other exciting projects. Until next week, goodbye.